Hey guys, what is up? This is my reaction, breakdown, and just personal thoughts of what I thought of Invincible Season 3, Episode 6, titled All I Can Say Is I'm Sorry. Now, I thought this episode was good. It definitely didn't feel as much like a filler episode like last week's did, even though I feel like last week's had a lot of important things, that we'll have to maybe see in the future. But to me, this episode felt like there was more to it, and I really appreciated that personally. And, just starting off at the beginning with Powerplex, and that's who we're going to talk about, I think, at first. I think I'm going to cover Powerplex first, and then we'll talk about everything later. Starting off with Powerplex and kind of like his origin story of how he became who he is and why he is feeling so strongly about why he feels the way he feels. I thought they handled that really well, and it kind of gave a, Batman versus Superman vibe, where Powerplex at the time is called Scott. His name's Scott, and he's, trying to save, the people he loves, and the reality is he's not able to. He's just a normal human. He has a little bit of an ability, but, when it really comes down to it, he is not going to be able to do, what someone else could do. And there's no way to save the people he loves. He can't save his aunt. He can't save his sister, and he can't save his niece. And he has to just see them not just horrifically die, not just die, but horrifically die. And he puts all the blame, not just on Omni-Man, but also on Mark. And for me, there was a question that I raised with this character as I was watching the show. Because at first, I really understood where he was coming from, even though I also understand, where Mark's at, and that, some of these elements could be considered Mark's fault. But the reality is that there's nothing really Mark could have done in that situation, especially when you're fighting someone like Omni-Man, who at that time was not just his father, but was an ultimate, just like a beast of a man, a beast of a creature. It's like there's only so much that a human being can do, and, it's like I could understand why he would want to revenge. Very similar to the way maybe Batman in Batman versus Superman would want revenge. But there's a question of, when is a character no longer relatable? And at a certain point, Scott starts to become unrelatable. But that's the point that I think the show was giving us, was that there's lessons that can be learned with this character, not just with Scott, but also his wife, and what they were putting their kid through, what they were putting themselves through. It's their family's death, his family's death, when it comes to his wife and his son, has just as much a fault as it is with him as it could be with Mark or anyone else. But at the end of the day, it is mostly the fault of Scott. Scott Powerplex brought this upon himself and caused his family to suffer for his ambitions, for the things that he desired, for his anger, for his hatred, for him trying to put all the blame of what he couldn't do, the fact that he couldn't save his sister, he couldn't save his niece. He puts all that blame on Mark. And we can try to dictate what the lessons are, but I think one of the biggest lessons it is for me is there's always a balance to the things that you feel. For Batman, before he was able to kill one, Batman wasn't going to put anyone in harm's way to have that confrontation with Superman in Batman vs. Superman. But also, when Batman hears and understands that Superman does care about deeper things other than himself, that he actually cares about human beings, and the relation that human being relates to his own mother, that causes him to, back away and doesn't go all the way through trying to kill Superman. Batman had a sense of balance when it came to his choices of action. He may feel a certain way, but there is a line that even for him, he wasn't going to cross if he understood that was there. And that's something that Powerplex doesn't have. He has so been dwelled into what he believes, what he feels is justifiable, that he is going to go as far as what's needed. And if he ever goes too far and someone he loves dies because of his decision, it's just going to continue to fuel the ideology he stands with. There's no hard reality that can make him snap out of his belief system that's guiding him towards this destructive path. And we can examine that with really anything. If it's, politics or any sorts of groupthink we can see nowadays on the internet, it's pretty strong. And, there's things I can agree with people on, but there's always lines, right? There's always lines that we have that we try not to go too far with, because if we take it too far, sometimes you're not going to be able to come back from it. And not only can we see that today in different, belief systems, no longer on whatever political aisle, but, just like I said, even in, do you hate DC? Do you hate Marvel? Do you hate the Snyderverse? Do you love the Snyderverse? There's things you can do, devotions you can make for yourself. And if you don't have balances between your choices, sometimes things can go too far. And I think that's a good lesson, especially nowadays. I actually think that's a really great lesson to learn, because you can always justify your actions. But doesn't mean that your actions won't have consequences, not just to yourself, but to the people around you. And if you care for your loved ones and you care for others, you got to make rules for yourself to make sure you don't go too far. One of my personal rules is I don't other people. I don't make a rule about othering people. Now, I may have to talk about a certain group or a certain demographic when it comes to something that's, factually true or statistically true. You have to be able to have honest conversations, but I don't point at a group of people and say they're the problem that needs to be dealt with, because the moment you do that, you are heading towards a violent solution, no matter what, right? You don't other people. That's just a clear rule that I have. And you can tell that Powerplex never really, put those rules in place, which leads to the death of his family, which is just really sad. And the fact that he never even truly gets over that, never learns from it. And I'm assuming we will see him in the future, because at the beginning of the show, I'm hoping we'll see him in the future as an ally to Mark, that maybe he'll come around and see how difficult it actually is to make sure when you're fighting crime or you're doing something, you don't go too far. That's what I was really hoping for. And clearly that's not going to be it. So the next time we see him, I don't know if he's going to be useful to fight the Filtermites. I don't know if he's going to be useful to fight the, multitude of marks that we're going to be seeing probably in the next episode. But, I do think no matter what, if he's going to be a villain or someone that's going to help, or maybe a mix of both, I do think we're going to see Powerplex in the future. It's just a bummer that, everything went the way it went. And, for me, going back to when he became no longer relatable, to me, it was really hard to see him as relatable when he was working at the Pentagon, but specifically within the agency that deals with preparing for the Viltrumites. Like, if anyone was aware of how difficult certain things was, it was him. But people do have a lot of hatred towards Mark, and Mark probably didn't help the situation, especially when he stormed the building in Pentagon. And I do wonder if this has kind of been a lesson to Mark to make sure that he is carrying himself with a sense of balance and he himself doesn't go too far. I think, sometimes you learn lessons hardly, and sometimes, like with Powerplex, you're not going to learn, but maybe with Mark, he's able to learn. I'm hopeful for that. But without further ado, let's kind of hit on some other quick things before we wrap this up. To me, Rexplode's origin was interesting to hear, but I want to see it. To be honest with you, I really loved what they did with Adam Eve, where they did that special with her before they did the other season. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And honestly, it's something that I wish they would have done this season with Invincible. I really wish before the third season came out, we would have had a special episode dealing with Rexplode, because I do think that if we would have had that understanding, I think this episode would have had a lot more meaning. And honestly, I think Amazon, if anyone could do it, Amazon could do it. And it could be just a nice little treat. You could put it in your budget that you're going to make this extra episode that's not going to come out with the season, but is going to come out in the middle between the seasons when they actually come out. And I think it could just be a fun way to do something really cool that could show fans that you appreciate them as a studio, and that you're doing things to not just honor the source material, but to give fans something to really enjoy while they're waiting for the series that we always have to wait a decent while to watch. You know, the thing that was cool too, and I was really happy about this, was with Monster Girl. It was cool to finally have something for her that will allow her, honestly, to, if she wants to, she could probably be immortal. Now, for you guys that are really invested in Invincible, I'm going to start rereading the comic soon, because I started at the beginning and I kind of had fell off, and I'm going to get back to reading it again. You know, with Invincible, with her powers, I know that it makes her de-age, and this is basically stopping that from happening. But I guess my question would be, with the de-aging process being stopped, if she wants to de-age again, so let's say she gets in her 30s, for example, and she wants to de-age back to her 20s, or she goes to 40 and she wants to de-age back to her 20s, does her health start to decline when she does that? Because they kind of mentioned something about her DNA, about the way her powers work, and I don't know that. So that'd be a question for you guys that are true Invincible fans. Do you know how all her powers work? And that basically, if she doesn't wear this belt, not only does she continue to age backwards and get younger and younger and younger, but does that also mean that she, you know, is actually losing certain parts of her DNA that actually keeps her alive, which would also add to the whole curse element. So I don't know. That'd be something I would be interested in knowing. I just don't know much about it, so I'd be curious to hear y'all's thoughts on that. When it came to the family interactions, Paul's funny, but I have questions about Paul. I have heard some things about the Amber character and her boyfriend, and I have this weird feeling that maybe they're going to give that to Paul. But I don't know anybody that would be crazy enough. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but I don't know anybody that'd be crazy enough to do the things that supposedly the Amber character's boyfriend does to her. If they give that to Paul, the boyfriend of Mark's mom, I don't know anybody that'd be crazy enough to do those things, knowing that both of her children are these superpower beings that could destroy you in an instant, right? Like, literally in an instant. I don't know if anybody brave would be brave enough to do that. But as a character, he is funny. He's a lot of fun to be around. Him trying to adjust being around these kids that are just super, super powerful, and trying to adjust to that, I think, is a lot of fun. And even Oliver, Oliver's just, fun to be around. You can even see that Oliver finds him endearing, which is kind of cool because, Oliver has a deep, really strong memory, so he remembers everything. So even if Paul dies, and that would be interesting too, is that, someone like Oliver really looks at Omni-Man in a really good way because of what he remembers. But I wonder if something like Omni-Man comes in and killed Paul, I wonder if that would change the way that Oliver viewed his own father. That's just my, just me thinking out loud, but I'd be curious to find out about that. The clip of the part of the episode where Scott is working at the Pentagon, you find out that he has all this knowledge and all these things. They bring up that, that even if they don't have Mark, they may have 2A, and they bring up the character 2A. We're like, well, who's 2A? And I think it was clear to me that 2A is Oliver. That they have Oliver, and that eventually, once Oliver gets older, and, Cecil still has plans for Oliver, and that maybe even if Mark goes rogue or goes evil or whatever, they still are hoping that they can use Oliver to help save Earth. So that was just something interesting. I thought it was just a little thing, that I thought was kind of cool. Now, to me, when it comes to Oliver, and I think this kind of rounds everything up, which is the question of redemption. Do people have the opportunity for redemption? And at what point does someone have the opportunity of redemption? If someone has killed thousands and thousands of people, do they have the opportunity of redemption? If someone's killed one person, do they have the opportunity of redemption? If someone's own folly leads to the destruction of their own family and the death of their own family, do they have a chance at redemption? And I guess it's person by person. I do believe in grace. this is my personal belief as a Christian. I'm a Christian, so I do believe that, grace should be given to others, but even at a certain point, you do feel as a human being, right? Like we're all human. We all fall short in certain ways. We all have our, weaknesses of what we feel like is going too far. There is a certain point of, can someone be redeemed? And even like narrative truths, right? So there's like logical truths, and then there's narrative truths. So like a logical truth is, I know if I throw this, it's going to go over here no matter what because of physics or whatever, right? But there is narrative truths about, even when you're telling a story, but life, right? We know certain times in our own lives when something is too far, when someone has crossed the line. And a lot of times we see those narrative truths told in storytelling because that's where we would mostly see it. But it really does pay tribute to our lives, because that's why it is a narrative truth, because when we see it in a story, we know it's true because how we've experienced it in our own lives. And I do wonder, it's like, maybe the redemption that he has to have, Omni-Man gets to have, will come with a price. And maybe certain things for some people can never be forgiven, and maybe the sad thing is, even with like Powerplex, is that if he was able to forgive Mark, right? If he was able to let go and forgive Mark and live a normal life, he would still be alive. He would be living a better life. His wife would be alive and his child would be alive. But because he wasn't willing to give redemption, he wasn't willing to forgive, now he's going to be a man, if he ever realizes it, is going to be a man that needs to seek redemption as well. And anyway, I just thought that was an interesting question. Questions about redemption and someone can be forgiven, because of the conversation that Oliver was having after fighting the Elephant Man. The questions that Oliver was having personally about, if his father, Omni-Man, could ever be forgiven. And I don't know. I think the only way Omni-Man can be forgiven, it comes with two things. It comes with time, but time is like maybe after everyone that was around during that event is dead, died of old age. And then the second thing is maybe if he puts his life on the line and saves the very planet that he was supposed to conquer one day. I think that's the only way that he can truly be redeemed, but that's just me personally. Now, the last thing I'll bring up and just kind of teases for next episode is definitely dealing with Mark. All the multitude of marks that Langstrom had. Someone gave me a hard time when I got confused who controlled the little sphere that was watching the family. And I just didn't catch the voice, but it is Langstrom. He is watching the family, and he has gotten a bunch of Mark clones to go after our Mark to have a big battle. And everything I've heard is when this happens, this is going to be crazy. Like, this is going to be a crazy fight. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out. I'm a little nervous because I think maybe some of the characters I really like may not make it out. But this would be a good time to ring Powerplex out. It's like, you hate Mark? Well, here's like 30 of them. Have your way. Fight it out, But anyway, guys, I think I'm going to leave that there. Let me know what you thought of this episode. What episode right now, as we've gotten through this season, what episode has been the best one for you? I would really love to hear what your thoughts are on that. But anyway, guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.